guest is someone I consider a very dear friend, he's the most courageous person I know. Bob Mazur, the Infiltrator. For those of you not familiar, Bob has earned global acclaim as one of the world's leading experts on the financial escapades of the underworld. There's no one with more firsthand knowledge about how international banks and businesses cater to those who own the nearly $2 trillion, with a T, $2 trillion in criminal proceeds laundered annually. For years, in the eyes of organized crime leaders, Bob was a highly successful mob-connected money launderer that helped manage their illicit fortunes. His clients, some of the most famous and deadly drug cartel bosses, offered a $500,000 price tag on Bob's head when arrests were made around the world and he was revealed to be a highly trained U.S. federal undercover agent. Bob is the author of a phenomenal book. You need to get it if you haven't gotten it yet, The Infiltrator. It's a memoir about Bob's undercover life, much of which was spent acting as a conduit between the ruthless drug barons and corrupt, legitimate-appearing senior executives that cleaned billions of dollars of blood-stained money through otherwise respectable international banks and businesses. Bob has transformed his underworld experience and current-day involvement in the money laundering field into a remarkable lesson for today's business sector. After completing a highly decorated 27-year career as a federal agent in 3 U.S. federal agencies, Bob is now the president of KYC Solutions, a firm that provides speaking, expert witness, and consulting services to companies worldwide. Bob's book, The Infiltrator, is now available in 10 languages in more than 50 countries and is the basis for my favorite movie, yes, also named The Infiltrator, starring Bryan Cranston, Diane Kruger, and other internationally known cast members. More information about Bob Mazur, his book, and the film based on his life can be found at Robert Mazur, M-A-Z-U-R, robertmazur.com. Bob, welcome back to Operation Freedom.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be on your show.
It's an honor to have you aboard, Bob, as always. Bob, you go around the world speaking about anti-money laundering training, and you've developed this entire, I believe, course and webinar. You now have. Now, with this coronavirus lockdown, that hasn't stopped Bob. Educate our listeners in what you're doing about education as it relates to anti-money laundering activities.
Well, I'm offering a cost-effective method for international institutions to maintain training for their staff during these lockdowns, and have recently been doing podcasts and webinars for institutions that have branches in multiple countries, so we can share ideas and try to provide assistance to hundreds of employees at a time.
And how can folks learn more about that?
Oh, just go to my website, robertmazur.com, and there's information under the consulting and speaking section about those webinars.
Now, Bob, in your introduction, I spoke about how you infiltrated, actually, a number of entities, one of which was the Medellin drug cartel, which was being run by Pablo Escobar at the time. And you also infiltrated the banking, what I call the banking syndicate. And in particular, the bank that you kind of focused on as it relates to this infiltration was the Bank of Credit and Commerce International. Educate our listeners on what you learned about their methods and how that bank serviced their clients that were involved in, well, nefarious activities such as the Medellin drug cartel.
Yeah. Well, BCCI was the 7th largest privately held bank in the world. They had a presence in 72 countries. They had more than 500 and some branches, and quite a few of them were in Colombia. I really stumbled across them, and I think that says something about this problem within the moral core of the international banking world. I didn't go into BCCI because I knew for a fact that they were dealing with bad guys. What had happened was that the bad guys, the Medellin cartel, told me that they preferred that I not pay them ultimately out at the end of the money laundering system with checks and wires that came from U.S. dollar accounts in the United States. Their preference was they wanted U.S. dollar accounts in Panama. Because the U.S. dollar is pretty much the principal currency of Panama, they have many U.S. dollar banks that offer U.S. dollar accounts. So I didn't want to do what typically is done in the law enforcement community. People at the very highest levels in Washington will go to the security departments of international banks like Bank of America or whoever and say, we've got this undercover operation. We need accounts in Panama. Would you help us? And, of course, they do. My thought was, I've spent years putting this front together. It's not good for security of the operation to be telling anybody about who we really are. So let me just walk into a bank that offers international banking, and I'll just open an account like anybody else does in a private client division. So I happened to be driving down the street, and to the demise of BCCI, they always had huge, prominent gold signs, big letters, Bank of Credit and Commerce International, BCCI. And I noticed it in Tampa. There was a Tampa branch. So I called them, just like anybody would who wants to open up an account outside the U.S., and I said, listen, I would like to get a meeting with someone in your private client division. I represent clients in Colombia, and we have some needs for an account in Panama. And the gentleman said to me, well, you need to send us your resume, 3 bank references, 3 business references, and copies of your account to show that you've got at least $1 million in play. And if you have that, then we'll give you a meeting. I sent that to them. I got the meeting. I sat down. I said to the gentleman, listen, I am responsible for the financial affairs of my clients, all of whom are located in Medellin, Colombia. They have businesses here in the United States that are very, very active, create massive amounts of capital. And it's my responsibility to help them to move that capital in a very quiet way across borders. So the guy said to me, well, do you need to get the money out of the United States at times? And I said, yeah, I do. And he said, well, obviously, that's the black market. We have many accounts of people who help people that operate in the black market. We used to recommend Grand Cayman as the jurisdiction, but now we recommend Panama. And you don't even have to go to Panama. We have, for all of our accounts worldwide, I have the forms right here, and we'll fill them out. We'll send them via pouch down to Panama. It'll be opened. They'll assign someone to your account, but I'll manage it from here. So eventually I opened up the account, and actually, and then I started talking more openly about the source of the funds, of course, recording all the conversations, and they didn't have any problems whatsoever in taking drug money. As a matter of fact, they had special methodologies that should be used in order to make sure that we didn't get caught. So ultimately, we prosecute those guys, and when I get the opportunity, I had the opportunity to be part of a team to debrief them. I'm sitting in a jail cell, and they're in orange jumpers, and the guy looks at me completely seriously, and he goes, I don't understand why you guys are picking on us. We weren't doing anything that isn't being done by the rest of the international banking community. At the moment, I said to myself, okay, he's just trying to really minimize his guilt. But I've ultimately come to realize that what they said was, in fact, the truth. The methodologies that they taught me in the 80s, here's some of the things that the bank did. You walk in the door, once they're comfortable with you, they give you the card of a lawyer who they say, this is the guy you want to go to get the Panamanian corporations, BVI corporations, Gibraltar corporations, whatever jurisdiction, that we'll use to be the account holders and we'll hold out as being the beneficial owners of the accounts that we open up. And when we establish accounts for you in different parts of the world, you need to sign this form here that says hold all mail. And the reason you want to do that is you don't want to have our Swiss office mailing to you statements, because customs would be looking at it as the stuff comes into the country, and then they're going to link you to working with us. So if we absolutely have to mail you something, we'll send it in a white envelope with no logo on it whatsoever. And really, we prefer to do personal visits. So we can send someone from Paris to meet with your client in Colombia, and therefore your client in Colombia doesn't have to be exposed to walking into a branch. They can find out all their information there. And by the way, we really do want you to open up safe deposit boxes in every location. you can pay for them in advance for years in cash. That way we don't debit your account. And then we can use that, we'll put that in another name, and we'll use that to store your bank records that we hold, and you can come to the bank anytime and get them. And as a matter of fact, if you have couriers that maybe are delivering cash, or you have other assets that need to be held, you can put them in the safe deposit box. And of course, when you visit us, don't worry. For example, your customers in Colombia, every 6 months we rent a new house that is not, this looks like anybody else's house, but that's really where we meet. We arrange meetings with high net worth people so that they don't have to walk into a branch, and they can come there. We're going to have these computers, and they're encrypted, so that we can then show what's going on in your account. And we've got a few techniques that we wind up using as well. We have this thing called back-to-back loans. So we'll take your money in cash. We'll eventually get it into a CD in Luxembourg, and then there'll be no connection on paper, but we'll give you a separate corporate loan somewhere else in the world. So your $1 million that is sitting in capital, it won't even be connected as pledged assets to the loan. We'll just give you that loan over here in another country. Then you can repatriate that money, and it'll look like a loan, so you don't have to worry about explaining where you got the money from. And at the end of 90 days, we close out the CD. That pays off the loan. But the rest of the world's not going to know it. And don't worry about our wire transfers when we send them. We strip the information off of them that would otherwise clearly identify who you are, or the sensitive things that we don't want to have happen. And, hey, don't worry about the accounts, because they're going to be numbered, and nobody's going to know about that. And if we really need to be secretive about the movement of your money, we'll hide it in bank-to-bank transfers. That's done through SWIFT messages, that instead of it being Bob Mazur's account that sent $1 million, we'll bundle your money and 3 or 4 other people, and we'll send $10 million to another bank, and it'll be appear on the surface of anybody looking at the wires as being a bank-to-bank transfer. And we have other technologies as well. We do things called mirror transactions, where if you want to move money from one country to another, we can just have our brokerage firm that we deal with buy and sell the same blue chip stocks or gold futures at the exact same minute, so there's not going to be a gain or a loss. So you give us $1 million, we put it into our house account, we buy-sell at the exact same time, and the party to whom we sell it, we then have them give them the instructions that they're going to send that money to your account. Nobody would ever be able to find this. It's just going to be completely unseen within the camouflage that we set up. So, Dave, those are pretty much some of the things that they were telling me about back in the 80s and explaining to me that this was industry standard within the international banking community.
So, Bob, when they're telling you all this, and it's like they're making this like so easy, did you think, wait a minute, this seems like too easy, and these guys about saying, hey, they're just doing it and everybody else is doing it, did you think these guys are outliers? Did any of that ever cross your mind, or when you were dealing with these people?
One of the things that they said to me after they were convicted was, and it was the first time that it made me think, well, maybe there's something to this. They said, we didn't start our careers with the Bank of Credit and Commerce International. One of the guys had been with Bank of America, another guy had been the Royal Bank of Canada, this guy had been with another bank. He goes, we just simply took the techniques that we learned in the industry and tried to perfect them to the best degree that we could within the Bank of Credit and Commerce International. So that got me thinking, and certainly as time went on, I saw other things that made me realize that they were not blowing smoke.
So, Bob, if I go to my bank and I ask them, I go out of my checking account, I need $1,000 cash. Bob, they look at me like I'm Pablo Escobar's brother.
Yep.
And start asking me a bunch of questions about what do I need $1,000 for? And as opposed to what you're talking about, where they're like, let's launder this. Oh, no problem. I mean, Bob, there's a big disconnect here.
Yeah, well, you're dealing probably with retail banking. We're talking about dealing with international banks with private client divisions that handle only the wealthiest of the wealthy. And once they believe that you are who you say you are, you have big bucks, you have big needs, all of a sudden the profit signs show up in their eyes, and they recognize, you know what? We can make a lot of money off of this account. You know, there have been some recent scandals in the Baltics, moving hundreds of billions of dollars. You know, do you know what kind of profits are made off of those massively capital-oriented? I mean, they're not making loans. They're taking in massive cash deposits, deposits in one sort or another that they make money off of because they're holding that money. So once they know that once they believe that you are part of the secret society, so to speak, it's a completely different language.
Folks, we're speaking with Bob Mazur, robertmazur.com, The Infiltrator, book, movie, gotta read it, gotta watch it. So Bob, some people would say, well, that was then, but now things are so tight, these kind of things are not happening. But in fact, as you mentioned, they are still happening, correct?
Absolutely, they're happening, and that's happening despite a very increased application of resources to the compliance departments of banks throughout the world. You know, I've always said banks have two brains. They have a compliance brain and a sales brain. The compliance brain is extraordinarily healthy. The compliance people, in my view, 99.9% of them are very, very well-intended, work darn hard, and really care about trying to not only make their institution more healthy, but make a better world. The problem is they're up against the most evil of evil, and some of them are within the same walls of their own bank. And I don't think that they can really grasp that kind of a concept.
So, Bob, you've been involved in this for decades. The biggest expert in the world in this, and in money laundering activities. Okay, so, Bob, can I give you a list of names of banks, and can you tell me if they've admitted, not just conjecture, but admitted to criminal offenses that were involved in helping their clients to intentionally launder money and commit crimes? Can we do that?
Yes.
Okay, so let's do yes, no. Okay, here we go. Lloyd's Bank.
Yes.
Credit Suisse.
Yes.
ABN AMRO.
AMRO, yes.
Barclays.
Yes.
ING.
Yep.
Okay. Standard Chartered Bank.
Yes.
BNP Paribas.
Yes.
Commerce Bank.
Yes.
Deutsche Bank.
Yes.
Industrial Bank of Korea.
Yes.
Bank Atlantic.
Yes.
American Express.
Yes.
Union Bank of California.
Yes.
Wachovia Bank.
Yes.
Ocean Bank.
Yes.
Lebanese Canadian Bank.
Yeah, in their case, they forfeited $102 million. They were basically laundering drug money for Hezbollah, but they closed their doors before anybody could go any further. So, but yes.
HSBC.
Yes.
Rabobank.
Yes.
Union Bank of Switzerland.
Yes.
Weigland and Company.
Yeah, that bank was also sold before the hammer could come down, but they did prosecute people there.
Bank Frey.
Yes.
Bank Lumi.
Yes.
Bank Julius Baer.
Yes.
Rotumbu Bank.
Yeah, by the French. That one wasn't a U.S. case, but it was a French case. All the others that you've said so far were U.S. cases, but yes.
Mizrahi Tavahoo Bank.
Yes.
Bank Bon Haiti and
Yes.
Bank Hapolim.
Bank Hapolim. It's a big bank in Israel, but yes.
How about U.S. Bancorp?
Yes.
And surely not this bank, J.P. Morgan Chase.
Yeah, they admitted they paid $2.6 billion in settlements. They admitted criminal offenses related to managing Bernie Madoff's accounts for 15 years. Okay. The sad thing about that list that you just read off is that although they admitted to criminal offenses, the Department of Justice, in most cases, in all cases, have given them what's called a deferred prosecution agreement. A deferred prosecution agreement means here's the indictment. you're going to agree that you did this, but here's a deferred prosecution agreement, and as long as you don't do what you did before for the next few years, we'll make the indictment go away, and the charges will be dropped, as long as you do that for X number of years. And what's even worse, beside deferred prosecutions, is non-prosecution agreements, where they admit the fact that they did it, but they're not going to get prosecuted, and you're going to pay a fine, and that's it.
Bob, wait. So of these 20-some banks I just named that you said yes after, was this kind of like an outlier where a lot of these banks just did one event and it was just like a little oversight, or were some of these banks involved in multiple events that were beyond egregious?
Yeah, I mean, probably the poster child for that comment is HSBC. In 2012, among other things, they admitted that they had facilitated the laundering of nearly $1 billion in drug proceeds for the Mexican and Colombian cartels. But fast forward 7 years later, in 2019, they admit that they were purposefully involved in criminal tax conspiracies with 720 U.S. citizens that hid $1.26 billion in assets from the U.S. government. And they've admitted that type of conduct in many countries around the world. They don't just do this for U.S. citizens. They do it for any citizen that wants to do it.
And the ultimate loser is every citizen, legitimate, non-criminal citizen of the world, that gets cheated, because these folks they're not paying taxes that they would be paying on this stuff, and the trillions of dollars in tax revenue could have been collected and helped people in need.